I'm Tonya Gray. Welcome to the first edition of Viral Stream TV Reports for You. Throughout the year, we will bring you stories that affect us all, but from a Southern perspective from the great state of Mississippi. Today's story deals with a familiar foe, the state of Mississippi's prison system, the recent deaths, horrifying living conditions, and mistreatment of prisoners. These stories have garnered national attention, including federal lawsuits filed by hip-hop icon Jay-Z and others on behalf of inmates. In this first report, we'll hear firsthand from other inmates of the Mississippi State prisons and those that support prison reform in Mississippi. We started the prison reform rally held on January 24th, 2020 at the Mississippi State Capitol building in Jackson. We had an opportunity to speak with people that attended the rally and ask them why they came out to support.
I think it was important for me to come out here today because I was once an inmate at Mississippi Department of Corrections. I served 18 mandatory years, and I was subdued to those inhumane situations. You know what I'm saying? The lack of staff, it was just horrible. And I just come out here to support the brothers, support the rally, you know, because I think it was important, and it has a spot in my heart. You know what I'm saying? I'm an activist for it. You know, that's why I'm here today.
The reason why we are here today at this rally is because we understand the grave misinjustice that has been taking place at MSP, which is the Mississippi State Penitentiary, specifically Parchman. Men, people, human beings, rights have been violated. Their civil and human rights have been violated. And then, of course, there are a lot of victims who have been stabbed and murdered. And so we're here to answer the cries of the community and to stand in solidarity of our brothers that are locked down.
Me, myself, I just got out of prison from doing 20 years and 7 months. I was sentenced to life in prison as a juvenile. And I'm just thankful that God blessed, you know, me to be able to get out here and continue to stress to the young youth today that, you know, crime don't pay and all that gang violence. I can remember when I first went in there, the first day I went in there, you know, the stuff that they talking about now, I had to go through that. Everybody got knives, everybody, it's like, you know, it's a land of the lost. There's nothing to live for, you know. And it ain't no rehabilitation. You got to rehabilitate yourself. You got to have God in your life. And without that, you're not going to make it in there, man. When you wake up in the morning, if you wake up, you know, because you ain't have to did nothing to nobody in there, and guys will still walk up to you and stab you, you know. It's senseless stuff, man.
I'm at the rally because I'm here to bring awareness to the situation from being a former inmate, and also to help people get justice, to introduce them to the right lawyers, to people that's really out here to help them. A lot of these lawyers in Jackson are gonna sell them out. A lot of people are not gonna hold these people accountable 6 months from now, a year from now. Nobody's talking about these guards taking money from these inmates. Nobody's trying to trace that down. The feds hadn't said anything. They won't step in. We all know these Jim Crow laws still live here today. I talked to a brother last night that was beat up by 4 police officers. He filed a lawsuit with this certain law firm. I won't give their name, but they haven't even filed this paperwork yet. It's been over 3 months. What's the holdup? What's the holdup for justice? We're rallying today, but we need to rally tomorrow and so forth and so forth. It just don't stop here.
The January 24th, 2020 prison reform rally was sponsored by hip-hop mogul Jay-Z and rapper Yo Gotti through the Roc Nation organization. Neither showed for the rally, but we did ask folks how they felt the entertainers' involvement would help the cause.
It was a very good move on their part, but I do know Spiro personally, the attorney I work for, knows Spiro personally, Mr. Moore personally, and we know Mr. Blackman personally. They're not going to be able to do what they need to do without the power that we have behind us. Well, I applaud their efforts. I do applaud their efforts. But we need Mississippi lawyers to take care of this problem, and we have them. We have built a coalition.
Them stepping up and coming forth is showing where their heart is really at. You know what I mean? Sometimes we got to do what we got to do to get what we got to get, you know? And you take that and you turn that negative into a positive. You know, just like I tell guys, in the streets all the time, even if though you're in the streets. Is that what you're doing? Is that what you do? But allocate those funds to something positive, you know what I'm saying? And use it for the betterment. Don't stay in the streets. You know, use it for the good and get out the way.
They are in like a higher ranking than a lot of us. So with that being said, you know, they can publicly, you know, speak on it, like seeing Yandy here and all those people, other people here, that really kind of like shed a lot of light here for us.
State officials, including former Governor Phil Bryant, said the gangs are to blame for the recent problems in state prisons. Here are some of the reactions to former Governor Bryant's statements.
You're talking about the same governor who said that if a black man got elected, it would be 1,000 years of darkness. So until we have a conversation about that, we can't even talk logic about a racist governor, right? When the governor says that it's the inmates that are responsible for these stabbings, we have to talk about the real issue. First of all, let's talk about mass incarceration. If we want to talk about it, let's talk about the slavery that exists today in America, 13th, right? Let's talk about a racist governor who known about these things and done nothing. He remained silent as these issues continue to brew. We can prove in federal court that the state of Mississippi had knowledge about these stabbings. We can prove in federal court that the state had knowledge of these guards being corrupt. There's a guard that is being held in witness protection program. The same guard allegedly who allowed these stabbings to take place. She's in hiding now. Where is she at? Why hasn't she been criminally charged? Those are questions we gotta ask.
I feel like with Governor Bryant, if you don't put yourself in those shoes, you will never know. So he don't know what it's like to not be out here with like young black boys and not have the money at home, or your mother is struggling. He may not never been through that. So he don't know about why these gangs was created. Like they said up there, gangs was created to protect our sisters and brothers from a lot of, evil stuff that was going on in the 60s and 70s. So he don't know.
Gang wasn't built upon gang banging and killing each other. It was about uplifting the fallen humanity. It was about uplifting your neighborhood, building your community up. So all that gang violence, feeling like because he wear this color, you wear that color, that ain't what it's based about. Kids growing up thinking that you're supposed to be against one another when it's not like that. That wasn't what gang was built upon. Or you can say organizations. That's not what it's about.
My son's name is Johnny Holmes. He was at Unit 29 G building, New Year's Eve. He was stabbed in his eye. To this day, we have not talked to him, have not been in contact with him. All we know is they say he gonna lose his eye. They won't talk to us about him. We can't get a visit. We can't even send anybody to talk to him because they don't want us to know what's going on with him. But we're gonna find out.
You can teach people to have empathy, but to have compassion is godly. And no matter what these people have done, and might I say, everybody in there is not guilty, okay? No matter what the person has done, they've had their day in court. That still does not constitute them having these deplorable conditions and being okay with it.
We talked about the Governor Bryant also blamed gangs. On January 11th, I got an email from Representative Jarvis Dortch. They had taken a delegation of House members down to Parchman. It included Robert Johnson and Sonia Williams and a few other people. Representative Dortch said people blame the gangs, but we must have the staff to manage the situation. We as legislators have not lived up to our responsibility.
Hello, and welcome to the Tonya G Show. We are back, baby. New location, new vibrant set as you can see. We found a new home at We Believe Studios. I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Mr. Socrates Garrett for allowing the Tonya G Show to have a new home and just for this partnership. Mr. Garrett is the visionary and founder of the We Believe brand. So what is We Believe, you ask? Excuse me. We Believe is a global platform that provides family-appropriate media content that serves to educate, entertain, and inspire the viewing and listening audience. Want to live stream your church service or speaking engagements, or maybe you want to host your own podcast or TV show? You can have your very own channel here on WeBelieve.global. Want to advertise your brand or business on the We Believe platform? Visit WeBelieve.global to find out how. We're doing big things over here at We Believe, folks. This is just the beginning. So again, visit WeBelieve.global for more information. You can also see our live stream content on WeBelieveDigital.com. So now on to today's show. I have been wanting to speak to this young lady since August of 2020. I mean, I have rescheduled, I know, at least 3 times. So I am very, very thankful to have her in the studio audience. Miss Alicia Judkins is the Mississippi Director or Mississippi State Director for the criminal justice portion or criminal justice reform portion for forward.us.us. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited we could finally make this work.
My tongue is a little heavy, it's tied, but we're going to get through this. So I want you to talk to us about what forward.us does and why and when this organization was created.
Absolutely. So first of all, thanks again for having me.
Yes,
and I'm so excited to be here with you and your audience. So Forward.us was started in 2013 by leaders in the business and tech community. And so we work in 2 verticals, immigration and criminal justice, on the premise that we believe everybody has the right to the American dream.
Right.
So my role, of course, as you stated in my job title, is criminal justice. So Mississippi is one of 4 states where we work on criminal justice reform. And my role is a bit multifaceted. So one, and kind of my main role is legislative advocacy. So I partner with in-state groups, other nonprofits, advocacy organizations, grassroots, anybody kind of working in this space to help build up our legislative advocacy efforts for sentencing reform. Our main goal is to help advocate and lobby for reforms that are aimed at reducing the state's prison population. And I also have the opportunity to help resource other groups and organizations, maybe just getting started or doing some really great important work that could use some extra resource to help get the work off the ground. So that's the fortunate part of what I get to do as well.
Okay. And again, what year was this organization started? And this is Mark Zuckerberg. He's the founder.
He's one of the business and tech leaders. Yeah, so there's a whole host of folks that were involved in starting, but he might be one of the most famous.
Yes, indeed.
And so Forward was started in 2013. We didn't get into criminal justice work until about 2016, and we didn't begin work in Mississippi until about 2018.
Okay. So I want to read this quote, and a lot of my statistics I did get from the forward.us website. So it says the prison population in Mississippi has increased by 300% since 1982. Making our incarceration rate the 3rd highest. And at the time when I wrote these questions, it was the 3rd highest. I think we are the 2nd highest to date in the country and far outstripping the national average. Meanwhile, the violent crime rate has not increased since 2000. So who's locked up if it's no criminal activity really going on? Who is the demographic that is being affected by this?
Right. So you were correct in saying that Mississippi now has the 2nd highest rate of imprisonment. And what that translates to is that we lock up more people per capita than any other state in this country other than one state, and that's Louisiana. They're number 1. And so that's another interesting juxtaposition you pose is people think a high prison rate means you have high crime.
Right.
And there's actually research and data that shows there's a correlation between actually letting people out and returns to their communities and providing more meaningful opportunities for release with a decreased crime rate.
Right.
Like locking people up doesn't correlate with making your community safer.
Exactly.
And letting people out of prison doesn't correlate with your crime rate going up.
Exactly.
And so in Mississippi, 1 in 13 people has a felony conviction. If you're looking at the Black community, that number goes to 1 in 7. So to answer your question of who's locked up, I mean, this is impacting everybody. And then there are some statistics that where you will see that Black men are more disproportionately impacted. And that's not a Mississippi thing. That's across the United States. And so one that comes to mind is one of the things we worked on for the last 2 years is reforming the habitual penalties in the state. And Black men make up 13% of the state's population, but they represent 75% of the people serving time for an habitual penalty. So,
kind of talk about what some of those habitual sentencing looks like. What crimes or what offenses are affected with habitual sentencing?
So any crime or any offense, and for people who may not be familiar with the term habitual, it's the same thing as a 3 strikes law, and most states have them. And Mississippi actually has 2 different versions. They're nicknamed little habitual and big habitual. So for little habitual, that means your third offense is not considered a major or violent offense. So drug possession, for example. So in Mississippi, a first-time drug possession can get you 20 years. So without the habitual penalties, we already have some of the harshest and most extreme sentences in the entire country. But if it becomes your third offense under little habitual, what our laws currently state is that you have to do the maximum time for whatever that offense is. So for drugs, for instance. So we know a man named Paul Hauser who's currently serving 60 days for drug possession, and another man, Gregory Hollins, also serving 60 years for drug possession. But there are over 2,000 people in the state serving time under one of these habitual penalties. So it's a lot of people. And the second one is big habitual. And that's when one of your 3 offenses was considered violent. It doesn't have to be your current offense, just one of your previous. And so, for example, I don't know if you heard about the case of Tamika Drummer, who's currently serving life in prison for marijuana possession. Because one of her priors was considered a violent offense. And that's one of the things we were working really hard to try and change, so people like that don't have to serve these extreme and harsh sentences without the opportunity to come home. Until the laws change, she has to serve every day of that life sentence, and she's not parole eligible.
Oh, wow. So a lot of the offenses are drug-related offenses that lead to habitual sentencing?
A good chunk in Mississippi, like 1 in 5 people are serving time for a drug-related offense. So that's just a common issue we have in the state.
Okay. Speak about taxpayers' dollars and the money that's paid to house inmates, how much it is to house an inmate annually, and the total monies made annually from incarceration of prisoners.
Right. So Mississippi taxpayers spend approximately $340 million per year on prisons in the state.
Mississippi, $340 million
on prisons each year. And so we have state facilities and privately managed facilities in the state. I checked MDOC's annual report. The most recent one online is 2019. So the average cost per person in a state-run facility was $39.91. This was, again, the numbers for 2019. The cost per person in a privately run prison, the average was $54.61.
This is a day it costs to house?
Per day, per person.
So if we're looking at a year, what's that, maybe 40-something thousand or better to house an inmate, but we can't get a $40,000 loan. Okay. So oftentimes, people will say if they did the crime, they deserve to do the time. I personally don't think all scenarios are that cut and dry, and we're going to have to come up on a break. What are your thoughts on people who feel that way? Because, there will be people who are not sensitive to criminals. They don't care what it is. If you hadn't done it, then whatever. But once we come back in the 30 seconds, I want you to answer that, and I want you to kind of tell me why you feel the way you do, particularly working so close in this position.
Absolutely.
And just kind of go from there. We're going to go to a break here in the next 20 minutes. I also want to encourage everybody to support and subscribe to WeBelieveDigital.com. Tell a friend. We're doing great things over here. I also sell life insurance, so contact the kpgagency.com for all of your final expense and life insurance needs. We'll be right back. Hi, I'm Tonya Gray with your Insurance Minute. When you buy a life insurance policy, you're making an agreement with an insurance company to pay a monthly premium in exchange for a payment or death benefits to your beneficiaries at the time of your death. You could purchase a life insurance policy that lasts for just a few years or for your entire life, with death benefits ranging anywhere from several $1,000s to several $1 million. If you were to die unexpectedly, will anyone in your life be financially impacted? If the answer is yes, you might want to consider a life insurance policy. Life insurance helps protect the people in your life who need you the most. Legally, your beneficiaries can use a death benefit payout any way they wish. A life insurance death benefit is meant to replace the income of the policyholder, so beneficiaries can use the payout on whatever expenses they have after the death of the policyholder. Contact the KPG agency for a free quote to start a policy today.
Have you had your Earthblend coffee today? At Earthblend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earthblend Coffee. To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
We're back live on the Tonya G Show with my guest, Alicia Judkins. Yes, go ahead and answer that question for me, just on those who thinking that people that have done the crime deserve to do the time.
Right. So I think that notion, you did the crime, do the time, gets at the heart of why people don't understand why they're advocates for criminal justice reform, because they hear, sentencing reform or trying to get people out of prison. They hear a lack of accountability. And that's not what criminal justice reform is about. I believe in accountability,
right,
but I also believe in fairness. I also believe
Equality,
in second chances.
Right.
I also believe that whether you're incarcerated or not, whether you've made a mistake or not, you're still human and worthy of dignity and respect.
Exactly.
And so we have a responsibility to make sure that people who are incarcerated are not living in deplorable conditions,
right,
that they have access to adequate medical and mental health care.
Yes.
And it also means they shouldn't be serving an excessive sentence, right? Which is the heart of what I work on. This past legislative session, we worked on 2 pieces of legislation aimed at trying to get people home: habitual reforms and parole reforms. And there is a parole bill on the governor's desk, Senate Bill 2795. And again, it doesn't mean that we don't think people who have harmed or caused harm shouldn't be held accountable.
Right.
But we also think you just shouldn't throw people away and not give them another chance to be with their families and in their communities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the Jackson Free Press has had an article in October 6, 2020. And at that time, 80 prisoners had died in Mississippi prisons since December 2019. I think to date it's something like 100 that have died. On January 9th of 2020, you issued a statement that spoke about the repeated loss of life of the inmates, and this is kind of tying in with the conditions. The use of ineffective long sentences, inhumane conditions, and the understaffing of the prison system. Has much changed in any of these areas since you released that statement?
Right. So to date, more than 120 people have lost their lives.
120.
More than 120. Well into this year, we were continuing to see the loss of life. So my sentiments remain the same, that we're in a prison crisis, right, and the need for reforms are urgent. Because there are dozens of those 120 people that, if the bills we've been advocating for had become law, could have had the opportunity to return home to their families and not been in prison. So it's the same, just continuing to see the repeated loss of life just reminds us we have to keep fighting for these changes.
Right. I also read an article titled "The Lasting Legacy of Parchment Farm: The Prison Modeled After a Slave Plantation," and this is by the Innocent Staff, written in May 29th. And I think we kind of talked about this off camera. In the article, they used a portion of what Arthur David Oshinsky wrote in his book "Worse Than Slavery." Quote: "There were two reasons for parchment. One was money making, and the other was racial control. They went hand in hand," quote, end quote. Do you think that still applies to present day?
Right. I think that's the history of prisons and how they started in this country, and it's the legacy of how they're continuing to run. I don't think the average person not touched by the system thinks of it in that way. But when you look at laws across the country and how Black people and brown people are disproportionately impacted,
right?
What other conclusion can you draw? So absolutely.
Right. I have to reference articles because I've done a lot of reading just to prepare for you being here. And the Jackson Free Press just has amazing articles. They do a lot of work and post a lot of things that you guys do. So this is an article in the Associated Free Press. It actually talks about Senate Bill 123, which I think is the new 2123. I'm sorry, I have that written down wrong. And it is the Mississippi Correctional Safety and Rehabilitation Act of 2020, which would have made more inmates eligible for the possibility of parole. In Governor Reeves' veto message, he stated he had received calls from law enforcement officers and prosecutors who were concerned about the release of inmates that have violent history. So this is a two-part question. Speak a little more in depth about that particular bill and what it would have done for some of those incarcerated. And is it misleading to think that violent criminals would have been eligible for parole under this act?
All right. So Senate Bill 2123 was a piece of legislation from the 2020 legislative session. And you're correct in that the governor vetoed that. The long of that was he just felt it went too far. But there was also some misinformation about who was going to be parole eligible. Now, were there people who had been convicted of quote unquote violent offenses? Absolutely. So one thing just to clarify what parole eligibility is,
right?
It isn't by a certain date they open their prison doors and you come home. It simply
process,
means
right?
You have the opportunity to make your case before the governor-appointed parole board on whether or not you've been rehabilitated in a sense and can return home. It's a tool, a mechanism that the Department of Corrections can use to help decrease the prison population. Again, it gets at just the use of excessive sentences in the state, in that whole kind of lock them up and throw away the key. And so what parole expansion does is, again, it gives people another chance, and it gives people a lot of hope, right? Like, just think of what your mindset is if I'm stuck behind these prison walls, these deplorable conditions,
right?
Like no access to anything. And what that does to your psyche versus if you're working towards the goal of returning to your family,
right,
your loved ones, your kids, whomever, that changes things. And so again, parole eligibility is simply that, the chance to make your case before the governor appointed parole board. It is not a guarantee of release.
Gotcha.
That is what we've been advocating for. That still comes down to the parole board to make that decision. And also, there's the opportunity if there's victims, or the family of victims, in the instances that victims are part of the crime, they can make their case heard. If they want to oppose, they have that ability to do that. So this year, so that the governor vetoed Senate Bill 2123. So lawmakers went back to work this year, listening to the concerns of law enforcement, listening to the concerns of the governor, district attorneys, like kind of all the stakeholders in this process. They went back to the table, worked on something else, and came up with Senate Bill 2795. And so what that bill does is it does expand parole eligibility again to some people who are convicted of some violent offenses. So depending on the offense, you will become parole eligible again, not a guaranteed release, but you will have the chance to make your case before the parole board at 50% after serving 50% of your sentence, or 20 years, whichever is less. And for some armed offenses, 60% of your sentence, or 25 years, whichever is less. Now, if you were convicted of a sex offense, capital murder, drug trafficking, human trafficking, or you're serving time under a habitual sentence, this won't apply to you. And the same was true of Senate Bill 2123. Those people still will not have the opportunity to become parole eligible. But for example, armed robbery is one of the armed offenses that if the governor signs this bill, people with that offense are the only ones serving day for day time. They can't earn early release or MET, ERS. They don't have any ability to earn good time. No matter what they do, get their GED, complete alcohol and drug treatment, no matter what they do, they have to serve day for day of their time. And if the governor signs this bill after serving 60% of their sentence or 25 years, they get the opportunity to make their case heard. And immediately that's going to impact over 600 people.
That would be eligible for parole. 600. Okay. Go on. I'm sorry. Continue.
But yeah, again, that bill is on the governor's desk. We are anxiously awaiting.
When will you know?
He has until April 22nd to either sign or veto the bill. And in Mississippi, the way that works is if by April 22nd, if he hasn't vetoed the bill, it will automatically become law on July 1st.
Really?
So he doesn't have to actually sign it, make a big public, to do about it.
He can just not.
Right.
Yeah.
But as long as he doesn't veto it,
then it will pass.
Then it will automatically go into law.
So how does this also, because you're speaking about how some people who have a criminal history can be eligible for parole. How does this affect non-violent criminals if it's drug-related charges and them being eligible for parole? Is it some of the same? I mean, they will be eligible?
Yeah, so there's actually a group of people. There was some past reforms back in 2014 that changed how we sentence people for certain drug offenses, but it was only prospective, so it only impacted you the year 2014 going forward. It didn't impact people already serving time for those same crimes. And so with that population and other nonviolent offenses, you can become parole eligible after serving 10 years or 20% of your sentence.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back after these messages.
Welcome to the Adventurous Podcast. I'm your host, Deidre Perry, and these are my co-hosts. And weekly, we will be coming to you to bring you the latest information in the world of agriculture. We invite you to join us every Saturday from 10 to 10:30. Join us. Come on, take an adventure.
Hello, friends. This is Pastor J. Artie Stuckey, and I'm personally inviting each and every one of you to join me and the Voices of Restoration May 15th at New Horizon Church International, as we will be having our live recording and videotaping. Listen, you don't want to miss this event. It's going to be awesome and amazing. If you need to get your tickets, the tickets are only $10, and we're looking to see each and every one of you there. Don't miss it.
Have you had your Earth Blend coffee today? At Earth Blend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earth Blend Coffee. To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
Yes, we're back live on the Tonya G Show with my guest, Alicia Judkins, forward.us. Look the website up. We were speaking about the Senate bill helping non-violent criminals, those particularly with drug offenses. Continue on with that.
Right, yes. So Senate Bill 2795, again, which is on the governor's desk, for folks with non-violent offenses, they can become parole eligible after serving a minimum of 10 years of their sentence.
10 years. Mm-hmm. Okay. What are your thoughts on clemency being exercised by governors?
Clemency is a wonderful tool that can be used by governors to help bring people home. Governors have the ability to commute a sentence, so shorten it, or to pardon a sentence, forgive it completely. So we saw a lot of this happening across the country when we had the COVID-19 outbreak last year. And so you saw advocates across the country calling for governors, lawmakers to get people out of jails and prisons, particularly youth, and particularly the elderly, and folks with underlying health conditions who would have been at greater risk of contracting the virus. And also because in prison and jail facilities, you can't be socially distant. These are not the cleanest places we have in the country, and they're essentially hotbeds for spreading disease. So we saw a lot of that happening across the country. So again, clemency is a wonderful and a powerful tool that can be used to help bring people home.
So I want to know, I just want to ask your personal opinion. With legislation and the governor knowing the living conditions, particularly at Parchment, why are they not doing more? Because, I mean, they know this exists, so why are they not giving the funding to fix the living conditions? Why are they not giving the funding to make sure that they have the right things to eat, that, you know, you treat dogs, you treat animals better than you're treating these men. So men and women, you're absolutely right. So the governors, Governor Phil Bryant, Governor Haley Barbour, Governor Tate Reeves, are fully aware of what is going on. So why isn't anything being done?
I think there are a couple of answers. So one, we have to highlight the fact that not only are prisons not adequately funded, but neither is public education, right? Neither are rural healthcare facilities. There are many things. Mississippi is one of the poorest states in the country, so there are many things not funded. So you got to put that in, like, if we don't have enough money for our public schools, you got to know that they're not going to find money to spend on prisons. So that's part of the issue. You're right. Our elected leaders are well aware. They have toured these places. They've seen it up close and personal, but no, like, that also comes with a lot of pushback. Another reason there was opposition to even the bills last year was what you talked about. People were afraid you were going to open the prison doors and let dangerous people out, and so people are scared, and you don't want to be accused of being the one who let all these dangerous people out of prison.
But Alicia, not to cut you off, I mean, in all reality, if there's a prison reform board a parole board that you have to go through before you release, then we know you're not just going to let violent criminals out. There's a process that you have to go through. So to say that is just very disingenuous. But go on.
I mean, I don't disagree, but, you know, that works. Fear works. And particularly for folks who are in elected positions and they're thinking about, nobody wants to be accused of being called soft on crime as opposed to tough on crime.
We just said the statistics for criminal crime has not increased since 2000.
Right, and there's another great example. Our southern neighbor, Texas, they've actually closed multiple prisons over the last decade, decreased their prison population while simultaneously seeing a decrease in their crime rate.
Right.
And to put that in context, again, Mississippi has the second highest imprisonment rate in the country, but we rank 36th in the nation for violent crime.
And we only make up 13% of the population. That doesn't even make sense, that we could make up 75% of the prison population, but only make up 13% nationwide.
Yeah, and so what you're getting at is how we describe these bills. We work on common sense reforms, right? They're backed by research and data, by people who study, you know, these statistics and see there is a correlation between decreasing your prison population and also decreasing crime rates. There is a correlation when you spend money in areas that help people become active and productive, healthy and whole in their communities, providing whatever they need, whether it's like mental health or substance abuse treatment, education, job training, kind of whatever that need is. We tend to try to use prison to fill those voids when you can get that stuff outside of a confined prison setting. So that's why we say these are common sense reforms.
Exactly.
Not only are they going to help the people who are incarcerated, they're going to restore families, they're going to heal communities, and are also going to save precious taxpayer money. As I stated earlier, as taxpayers, we spend $340 million on prisons annually. When you're talking about people with medical conditions, the medical bill alone is $80 million annually just for medical expenses. So again, common sense reforms, and that is why we are urging Governor Reeves to sign Senate Bill 2795 because it will produce a cost savings to the state. And if people do make their case successfully to the parole board and they can return home, that's somebody you have contributing to the economy of the state and to businesses. So,
okay. I want to ask you, what are your thoughts on after an inmate has done their time and they don't have the right to vote? I know there are different criminal acts that you can, I guess, get expunged and you can reinstate your right to vote. But for the most part, if you have a felony, you can't vote. So what are your thoughts on not allowing inmates to vote after they've served their time?
Right. So I believe that, voting is a right, and that your right to vote should be, you should be re-enfranchised once you've served your time. But just to plug, there are some awesome advocates working on this issue. If you want to delve deeper, if your listeners have an interest, you should definitely reach out to my girl, Erika Bennett, who's the executive director of Mississippi Votes.
Yes.
She's doing incredible work engaging young people on the political landscape and the importance of voting. And Shambi Lambright, who's the executive director for One
Two people
Voice.
that I've wanted to speak to and reached out to on the show, but go on. I'm sorry.
Amazing Black women, both two
Indeed.
very dope Black women doing
Indeed.
great work. One Voice actually released a report this year on how Mississippi disenfranchises people. So you should definitely check that out and have both of them on.
Most definitely. So I want to talk about private prisons here a little bit. Private prison is the lesser of two evils. It continues the criminalization and profiting from mistreatment of the incarcerated. So we shouldn't have to choose between two unjust systems, because prison reforms are always on the table, as you have mentioned. And the prisons should include job programs, rehabilitation programs, as you've stated, expungement aid, and treatment options for mental illness and substance abuse that you've just stated. What are your thoughts on President Biden ordering the Justice Department to end the use of private prisons?
Right. So one, that's a good thing, right? For the very reason you stated in your question, like it's just not a good idea to profit off incarcerating a human being.
Right.
So that said, that only applies to people in federal custody, right? That doesn't trickle down to each individual state. So another point of clarity is Mississippi does have 3 privately run prisons, but they're not privately owned. Okay. So like there's a correctional authority or some part of that county that actually owns the prison. They just contract with a private contractor for the day-to-day operations, but they don't necessarily own that prison. So that's just a distinction here in Mississippi. But like you mentioned, rehabilitative programs, treatment programs, job training, these are all things people should have access to outside of a prison. You may have heard the term alternatives to prison or sentencing alternatives. Those are the things. So instead of going to prison, getting drug treatment. And Mississippi does have a drug court program. And not using jails and prisons as mental
institutions
because
exactly
the outpatient options aren't available in your community. So again, those things are definitely needed, and you shouldn't have to go to prison to get them.
Exactly. I want to talk a little bit about, well, before I go into that, I want to talk about how you got into this career.
Okay, so it was a bit of an indirect way. So when I was an undergrad, I had these lofty goals and big dreams of becoming a lawyer. And I've always been drawn to the advocacy space. And so in my head, human rights abuses weren't a thing in this country. Again, this is 19-year-old me. So I thought I needed to travel and go abroad and deal with things. So my big girl dream was to become a prosecutor for war crimes, right? Because these crazy things, these abuses aren't happening in the U.S.
Hold that thought, Alicia. We're going to go to a break. Again, contact the kpgagency.com for all your final expense needs. Hi, I'm Tonya Gray with your Insurance Minute. People buy life insurance for a number of reasons. One of the primary reasons is providing income protection for a family in the event a breadwinner passes away. Another reason is providing financial security for children should something happen to the parents. Life insurance can even be a way to offset estate taxes in large estate plans. Another reason some people buy life insurance is to save for retirement. The cash value in some permanent life insurance policies can grow tax deferred, and the cash value can be borrowed at a later date. When using life insurance as a cash savings vehicle, it is important to understand the internal fees and guarantees that are built into the policy. Life insurance should be used as a tool for financial protection in case of death. The KPG agency's focus is to provide financial protection in the most cost-effective way possible. Contact us today to start your policy.
Have you had your Earth Blend coffee today? At Earthblend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earthblend Coffee. To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
We're back live with the Tonya G Show. I'm here with my guest, Alicia Judkins, and she was explaining to us how she got into this exciting career.
Yeah, so when my plans were still to go to law school, I got the great advice to work in a law firm before pulling the trigger on that decision. And had the great fortune of having my first experience be at the Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery, Alabama, which is headed by Brian Stevenson. And worked there for 3 years doing death penalty mitigation investigations, really awesome and cool research projects into how our criminal justice system got to be the way it is, particularly in the Deep South. Then parlay that into another nonprofit where I focused solely on prison conditions and just kind of really developed my skills and passion as an advocate and as an investigator for prison conditions here in Mississippi. And it kind of just grew. And 13 years later, I am still advocating for my brothers and sisters and even kids who are behind prison walls. Again, advocating for folks is something innate in me. I can't really explain where it comes from other than it's my God-given purpose.
Right. Well, you just have a heart and you care. And
I do have a heart, and I
people
care.
Mistreated.
And I've been, again, doing this work for 13 years now. And the men and women and kids I've had the great fortune to come into contact with have really shaped and changed me for the better. I mean, you watch crime shows and documentaries, and it kind of scares you and it kind of creates this boogeyman image of the people who are in prison. And when the fact is, I'm like, you could be my neighbor, my uncle, my brother. Like, you could be my homeboy. Like, we would hang out on the weekends. Right. And so, I mean, I think we have to kind of work on the stigma too. The truth is, we're all touched by this.
We are.
1 in 2 Americans. Is touched by this. It's just something that we don't like to talk about. And there's a shame that comes with that. And part of what I hope that my work does is take that stigma and take that shame away from, again, because we all have worth and dignity just as humans. That's enough. You are worthy and you are enough regardless of the mistakes you made. My mentor and hero, Brian Stevenson, often says, each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. So if you are a thief, if you've stolen something, I believe you're more than just a thief.
Yes.
If you lie, I believe you're more than just a liar.
Right.
And even if you've taken a life, you're more than just a murderer.
Yes.
And so just getting at, we aren't defined by the worst things that we've done.
That is beautiful. That is beautiful. This kind of ties into a little bit of what you were saying. How has working in this realm changed your perception of the justice system, good, bad, or indifferent? And how has it changed your perception of criminals and sentencing? And you may have already answered that in talking about how you got into this career, but go ahead.
Right. I think it's altered how I view fairness. And I think the human in us wants to believe, well, if someone went to prison, then they got what they deserved. People don't know how many mistakes are made. Like, we assume that the authorities, the attorneys, district attorney, the judges, like, everyone is acting in good faith.
Exactly.
And that the accused is this awful being that we kind of have to hide away from the rest of the public.
Right.
And again, what my career has shown me is that is definitely not always the case. And as you stated earlier, it's just not that cut and dry.
Right.
Part of what I did as a mitigator was I asked the question, how did you get here? What led you to this place? And over my career, I've not run into someone who just woke up and said, today I want to be a bad person.
Right.
Today I feel like doing something evil. What can I get into?
Right.
And not to make excuses for people, but there are circumstances and
there are traumas.
There are all
traumas
kinds of things in desperation that leads people to make poor decisions.
Absolutely.
And one of the things we have to be careful of is go, in that situation, what I would do. And we can't impose our brain and our will on what someone else is do when their back is against the wall.
Exactly.
And I think that's another, like, why we can judge and sentence so harsh. So like, I would never.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if that was like, I wouldn't do this. And again, the men and women I've been exposed to have just taught me, like, we are all one bad decision away.
Alicia,
we are all one bad decision away from being right where they are. And so my empathy has definitely grown. I think, 13, 14, 15 years ago, I am just as judgmental. I'm just like, well, if you messed up, oh well. And it's an important question to ask. Who are we mad at and who are we scared of? That's something you hear kind of talked about in these spaces when we're creating laws that are going to impact millions of people.
Exactly.
Because, you just like, we want to deter and keep people from making bad choices when we don't even address the root of what led them to make the bad choices.
Exactly. So you think it's a lack of empathy? We just lack empathy in caring about inmates, or it's just because it doesn't directly affect us, we just don't have a concern for it?
Well, I think words matter. So, for example, like using the word inmate, right? And so I think part of how we get there is to censor the person. And so if you go back and watch, so you would notice I've not used that word. I've said people who are incarcerated. And I think when we lead with the person, then it's easier to humanize. When we use terms like inmate and convict and felon, we've already made the decision. We've already othered them in a way where we can't empathize and we can't see the human in them just by the words we chose. So when you say people, man, husband, use their names, censor the human, then you can empathize and listen to their story and hear how they got to the place where they ended up in. So yeah, that's really important to me.
Got you. So two-part question here. The prison system is a money-making business and employs thousands. Before I ask you that, let me ask you this. Where does the money go that is paid, I think you said $54 a day to house an inmate? How's that money divvied up? And I know you probably don't know all the particulars, but where does the money go?
Okay, so the 54 was for the privately run prisons. And so that's the amount per day that the state pays the private contractor to run the prison. So for those, like, that's where the money goes. And then your average cost per day, you're thinking about food, is like how they average like food, medical, just the average expenses of living from day to day. And so like if you go to MDOC's website, they have these reports, like anyone has access to them. It's a PDF you can go and look at, and it breaks down how the money is spent. So it's not going to a person per se, or agency, like it's how the money is being spent.
Got you. Okay, now on to my two-part question about the prison being a business, a money-making business and employing thousands. What do you say to those who argue that jobs lost in these positions will adversely affect the economy and or put us at greater exposure to crime? Due to this, coupled with corruption, kickbacks, and such, do you think things will change in the judicial system?
Yeah, so first we have two current examples. So one, the Walnut Grove Correctional Facility, which was closed back in September of 2015 or 2016. And then 2 years ago, you were starting to hear the calls for the closure of Parchment. And that's the theme that arose. What about the jobs? And so that's kind of the downside. In Mississippi, most of our facilities are in small, rural communities. So like the prison is going to be the largest employer. So I think it's up to our elected leaders, legislators, to come up with more creative ways for economic development for our communities. So like people's
We're not
only
relying
option
on prison,
is
right?
a prison. Like there are other jobs. And I think if we expand access to services like healthcare, mental health, substance abuse treatment, like those are the things, job training, that will help create jobs throughout Mississippi communities. Again, just like creating other opportunities other than the prison. And then the other point, we talked about this earlier, locking people up does not equate safer communities.
Right.
Just because you put a bunch of people in prison does not mean your crime rate is going to go down. And in fact, the data and research shows the exact opposite.
Okay. We're coming up on 30 seconds here. Shout out to the kpgagency.com. Go ahead and visit that website. Give us a call as well, 601-500-2751. I help with final expense. I help with life insurance, annuities, whatever you need. You can contact the KPG agency and we'll get you taken care of. Also, please support WeBelieveDigital.com. This is a great environment to come and host your own podcast if you're interested in having your own show. Or if you want to be a guest on the show, you can contact WeBelieveDigital.com.
Hello, friends. This is Pastor J. Artie Stuckey, and I'm personally inviting each and every one of you to join me and the Voices of Restoration May 15th at New Horizon Church International, as we will be having our live recording and videotaping. Listen, you don't want to miss this event. It's going to be awesome and amazing. If you need to get your tickets, the tickets are only $10, and we're looking to see each and every one of you there. Don't miss it.
Welcome to the Adventurous Podcast. I'm your host, Deidre Perry, and these are my co-hosts. And weekly, we will be coming to you to bring you the latest information in the world of agriculture. We invite you to join us every Saturday from 10 to 10:30. Join us. Come on, take an adventure.
Have you had your Earth Blend coffee today? At Earth Blend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earth Blend Coffee. To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
We are back with the Tonya G Show. Yes. Last segment here with my guest, Alicia Judkins with Forward.us. I want to talk a little bit about, do the prisons themselves have parole reform programs that they work on outside of, independent nonprofit organization advocacy groups? Do the prisons themselves have parole reforms in place to help with prisons?
No, prisons don't have parole reforms, but you will find different like rehabilitative type programs. So like you can, depending on which facility you're at, you can work on your GED. You have access to alcohol and drug treatment, different parenting skills, there are different kinds of classes you can take. Now, they're not offered at every prison, and everyone doesn't have access to them, which is a different issue. Like, you want to have these programs, but you also want everyone to have access to them. And I know from my time investigating prison conditions before I was with Forward, that was one of the things I heard about when I was inside facilities. Like, there's a waiting list, or, they don't have enough teachers. Just a whole host of issues. Staffing across the board has been an issue in prison facilities. That's just a hard job.
Yes.
But yeah, so like there are programs, but nothing geared at specifically parole.
Okay. What are your thoughts on women officers being guards in a male dominated facility? What are your thoughts on that? Because if I'm not mistaken, at Parchment, they had more female officers there, and I just have my own thoughts on a woman being able to contain a man. But what are your thoughts on women working in men prisons?
Yeah, so in Mississippi as a whole, not just Parchment, you will find that the majority of our line correctional staff are women, even though the majority of our incarcerated population are men. And also in Mississippi, you can be incredibly young. I believe they've recently raised the age to 21, but when I first got here and was doing this work, you could be 18.
That's terrible.
And working in a prison. And this issue was multifaceted. But you have the issue of low pay. And so the people who are most likely going to apply to these jobs are women who need the work as opposed to men. If I've got a family or whatever my circumstances are, here is a job. I'm willing to do whatever to take care of me and my family. And so really that's just the situation I mentioned earlier, that most of our prisons are in super rural communities
Right.
where there are not a lot of economic opportunities. So the options are limited for what you can do, particularly depending upon your education level. Again, this is a multifaceted
Right.
issue, but it does play a role in like what we saw with the violence erupting at Parchment, because you've got a bunch of
Absolutely.
men, but
Absolutely.
there are women in charge, and I've seen some of that stuff firsthand, doing work in prisons, and it's scary, but actually, like, I mean, I commend those women, right? Because I mean, that is not an easy job to go to every day. But I've seen some incredibly compassionate people
Right.
do this job.
Right.
Some not so, but I mean, there are women who really just want to help, and are going to do what they got to do to take care of themselves and their family. Again, that's probably another show. Like I said, that's multifaceted, but that's, again, our prisons are in rural areas where there's not a lot of opportunity. So you have a situation with people are doing what they got to do to take care of themselves and their families.
So when we talk about a lack of funding to pay the officers, lack of funding, I guess, to provide programs that's needed to rehabilitate the persons that are incarcerated, people that are incarcerated,
Gone,
I
girl.
will definitely
Show people first language. Yes.
definitely be more cognizant of not saying inmate. That was very powerful for you to say that. But with the lack of funding, how do you get the funding that is needed to pay? How do you get the funding to feed the inmates? How do you get the funding to fix the infrastructure? How do we get the funding?
That's why we have a state legislature. They are the ones who appropriate the funding to all state agencies, not just the prison system. So it's our state lawmakers, and as citizens, letting them know this is an issue I care about. When the legislative session starts in January, I mean, also people at the Capitol advocating for medical care. You'll see people advocating for more funding for education. So it's really just trying to make those touch points with our state leaders to let them know this is an issue that we care about and that we want to see worked on.
So is it a numbers game? Is it a certain number of people that should be bombarding the legislators? I mean, should we be contacting lobbyists? I mean, how do you make them do what they already know exists? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I mean, there are all kinds of groups who do this work, not just, myself and my colleagues at Forward. And so it's like kind of knowing those touch points, like who are the folks on the ground doing this work. And to get to your point, like these meetings are public. Things were a bit different, the last 2 years because of COVID. And so the Capitol has not been as open, but you could stream this stuff on YouTube. So if it's something like you're interested in, like the access is there. We at Forward, we'll often have a call page. We have one right now that people can access if they want to call. Like you can call or email the governor and ask him, tell him you want him to sign Senate Bill 2795. Quick plug, that's forward.us, fwd.us/Mississippi. That'll take you to a link. There's a script. It gives you what to say. You just give your name and your zip code, and like the person who answers the phone, it'll give you the opportunity to say, hey, I want Governor Reeves to sign this bill. And the same is true for anything you care about. Those numbers are public. You know who your legislator is, call them, email them. That information is available on the state legislator website. Say, hey, my name is Susie Joe, and I care
just
about...
call in.
Mm-hmm.
Call in.
And you're right, that does matter. And they get enough phone calls that's like, okay, these are the people that voted for me, and this is what they care about. So the numbers do matter. And, we talked about voting earlier, and I know that's something that people kind of tend to feel weary and exhausted because they want to know, like, do I really have a voice?
Right.
Am I really making a difference? But those little things add up and they do make a difference.
This is really good information. So talk to us about, I guess, any other things that Forward is working on. You have talked about Senate Bill
2795.
I wrote it, I typed it, and then 2795. But what else is going on that Forward.us is working on? Or is there something else that you want to talk about that happened in the legislation because the session closed on the 4th, April 4th?
Yes. So the 2021 session is over, and we worked on both parole expansion and habitual reforms, which we touched on earlier in our conversation. And so I just want to note that House Bill 796, which would have reformed our habitual penalties and provided meaningful opportunities for release for like the woman like Tamika Drummer, who we talked about, who's serving life for marijuana possession, and Paul Hauser and Gregory Hollins, who are doing 60 years day for day for drug possession. Bills like that would have helped. And so still got to be in the fight for that because those changes still need to happen. But again, Senate Bill 2795 is on the governor's desk. And if you would like to help us urge him to sign it, again, that website is fwd.us/Mississippi. And that'll open up a link that'll give you the option to both either call or email, whichever you're comfortable with. And just let your voice be heard and let the governor know you want him to sign and support this bill.
Call people, call.
Yes, please.
Email, write, go down to the Capitol, protest. We need to definitely get this legislation passed. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
So hopefully the governor will sign this bill and you can bring me back and we can talk about all the people that is going to help it and what it'll take to implement it. But again, criminal justice is my passion. I do hope people's interests were piqued.
Yes.
If you want to learn more, you can go to our website, forward.us, that's fwd.us, to see all the great things that we've been working on. There's some great reading on there. You can read more
Very
about
good articles, you guys.
Habitual reforms. We have a report called We All Pay. You can learn more about parole. It's called the Who, When, Where, and How of how parole works in Mississippi. Their explainer videos. This stuff is easy to digest. We make sure we put it in layman's terms so the everyday person can read and understand how it would impact them and the people that they love. So definitely check that out. If you want to reach out and ask questions, you can reach me at alesha@fwd.us.
Well, Ms. Judkins, I definitely appreciate you stopping by. This has been a wonderful, wonderful segment. Please stop by anytime and share with us any information that we need to know. I have 8 seconds. We'll see you next time on the Tonya G Show next Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. We're here, WeBelieveDigital.com. Hi, I'm Tonya Gray with your Insurance Minute. A final expense life insurance policy is also often called burial insurance. This type of insurance policy is designed to pay any cost associated with your death. The amount that the insurance policy pays out depends on how much you pay for the premiums during the life of the plan. Some people have a clear idea of how they want their funeral or burial to be, while other individuals do not care one way or another. Whether you have the perfect funeral planned or simply do not care what happens to your body after you die, it is still important to note that any type of funeral that is planned for you will not be cheap. The cost of a funeral is not something you want to leave to your family to come up with. Most people cannot afford to spend upwards of $10,000 all at once. If you do not want this burden to fall on your family and you do not have the cash ready to pay for your cremation or burial, final expense life insurance policies are there for you. Let the KPG agency help to ease the worry of this financial burden. Contact us today to start your policy.
Have you had your Earth Blend coffee today? At Earth Blend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earth Blend Coffee. To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
Welcome to the Adventurous Podcast. I'm your host, Deidre Perry, and these are my co-hosts. And weekly, we will be coming to you to bring you the latest information in the world of agriculture. We invite you to join us every Saturday from 10 to 10:30. Join us. Come on, take an adventure.
Hello, friends. This is Pastor J. Artie Stuckey, and I'm personally inviting each and every one of you to join me and the Voices of Restoration May 15th at New Horizon Church International, as we will be having our live recording and videotaping. Listen, you don't want to miss this event. It's going to be awesome and amazing. If you need to get your tickets, the tickets are only $10, and we're looking to see each and every one of you there. Don't miss it.